Okay. All right, so I hope everybody had a good lunch. We're going to continue on. I have this presentation on Mount St. Helens, and then Doc's going to do his presentation on the Ice Age, which is, I've never made a presentation on the Ice Age, Doc. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff to it. If you notice, is the airplane up here? Oh, yeah, he's got the airplane here. That is like classic. If you ever watch that debate between Ken Ham and Bill Nye, the science guy, he ain't the science guy. He's the science idiot.
TV would have to be covering that plane.
Right, and so Bill Nye, the science guy, gets in and tries to debate with Ken Ham, and Ken Ham didn't bring it up, and I didn't know why. I was like so frustrated, but they talk about, so remember when you're trying to teach evolution and you're trying to get people to believe, millions of billions of years, and listen, the reason they want you to believe in millions of billions of years is because then it discounts God. That's the only purpose of it, is to get rid of God. So when we look at that, you have to sit there and go, okay, so how do we know what's true is true? Okay? So how do I learn in science? Well, what we do is, number one is observation, right? I mean, we have to observe it. We watch something. Now, if you're looking at a historic scale, you're looking at a big scale, how long's the Earth been there, what's this, what's that? We weren't there to observe the whole thing. Now, we do have witnesses. The scriptures are the witnesses. What does evolution have? Somebody just thought it up. You ever look at some of the pictures? Think about this. You ever look at some of the pictures that they show in the museums of the dinosaurs with skin on? How do you know he was blue? How do you know that dinosaur had stripes? You know how you know? Because the artist looked at a whole bunch of bones sitting in one spot, went, well, I like the color blue. I like stripes. So I'm going to make a blue striped lizard. Well, what's the other color? Oh, I could pick any one I want. Because what?
Nobody knows.
The professor said it earlier. Hey, was there any flesh on that bone? What color was it? We don't know. So we can just make up anything we want. If you ever look at the science of taking a skull and making the face, so if you look at the skull, there's some traits that we can figure out it's an Asian or it's a Caucasian, or if it's an African, and then you can by the average put on the little buttons that they put on. They have these buttons that are little round things that are either they're thin or depending on Caucasian or whatever, and you put it on so the cheeks, the meat on the cheeks is bigger or less, and all this. Look, not every time do they do a facial thing on a skull does it come out to look just like that person, because we're guessing. Now, a lot of times it comes out close. Sometimes you're like, wow. But there's some chance in this. It's not full science. And so when we can look at people and say, oh, because you're this, you come from this area, then your face is going to have these distinct markings and everything. But anybody seen a dinosaur? So how do I know how much flesh is on their cheek? How do I know, by their teeth, whether they eat fruit or meat? Anybody? How do we know that something eats meat and not fruit?
Flat teeth, that would be more like fruit.
So because it's flat teeth, do you got flat teeth?
Not really.
Look, I'm going to tell you something. If you check my diet and you check my teeth, you'd be like, there's something wrong with this, because I am a meat eater. I don't like the fruits I eat fruits and vegetables because, I eat fruits and vegetables, but I prefer meat. So you can't sit there and say, because my teeth, I don't have like sharp canines and look like Dracula. So why would wouldn't we say I was not a meat eater? Because of our teeth? Then look at the fruit bat. Fruit bat has sharp teeth. So all these things that you get with these people saying, oh, this is good science, this is what the dinosaur looked like, this is this. Yeah, they can get close because we have the skeleton, but we can only get so close. So remember that, because what we have to do is we have to understand science. And science, the word science, then we have to say what is science? Science is observation, right? So what's a scientific experiment? It's observation. So watch this. We're going to do Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens is the greatest scientific observation to prove creation. It hurts evolution. They'll lie to you. They'll come up with all these things to make it work, but it doesn't work. Now watch. Mount St. Helens. I want you to look at this mountain. This is Mount St. Helens prior to 1980. This is Mount St. Helens right after the 80 when it erupted. Now, does that look like the same mountain? No. So let's watch this. So Noah, Genesis chapter 7, verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day where all the fountains of the great deep broke up and the windows of heaven were opened. If you ever go to the Creation Museum, this is their video. I don't know how to make the sound.
It's a tidal wave approaching land.
All right, now look. Remember what it said in those verses. Let's go back real quick. It said, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, and the 17th day of the month, the same day, were all the fountains of the great deep. You saw that chasm under the ocean that opens up, and were the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. So the windows of heaven give us the idea of rain. And when a lot of times you go to a Sunday school and they teach Noah, it rained for 44 days, or 40 days and 40 nights, or however they're going to teach it. But it didn't just rain. So you don't get this, it started raining and everybody's just kind of hanging out in the rain, dancing in it, jumping in puddles, and the puddles just kept getting bigger. What you have is this occurrence happens, and it's in a day. I mean, we're talking a total destruction of the world in hours, okay? Because we have this great flood. Now, you could get into that, and what we're going to do is we're going to look at God's proof that evolution is false and that what he said about creation is real is Mount St. Helens. Okay? Now, let me help you with some science. In the mid-1800s, a Scottish geologist named Sir Charles Lyell. Now, if you ever studied Darwin liked to listen to Lyell. Okay? He had all his books. He hung out with them. So, Lyell expanded on uniformitarianism to develop gradualism. Now, uniformitarianism and gradualism are pretty much the same thing. They kind of, as he started working on that uniformitarianism, which means, slow process, then he puts it into gradualism that makes it clear that it's a slow process. And the view that all features of the Earth's surface are produced by physical, chemical, and biological processes through a long period of geological time. So if we have to make everything a long time, can I tell you that what's interesting is Mount St. Helens, just so you know, took 1 million years in one day. Because see, we can't explain Mount St. Helens with uniformitarianism and gradualism, which is evolution. That all falls into the same thing. All right? So you start looking at this and you go, well, how were these made? Well, look, if you watch something, is there a slow erosion process? Anybody? Yes, there is. But that slow erosion process doesn't change the face of the earth like Mount St. Helens. Okay? So they say, okay, gradualism. Is there a gradual erosion at places? There is. We're not saying that it's not true, but the problem is it is not the only thing, okay? And if we have gradualism, then every change in the world has to be done gradually, and so then we need millions of billions of years. Now, I don't know, any of you I graduated high school in 1987. Anybody graduate before that? Anybody remember how old the earth was back then?
Millions.
It was millions of years. I remember sitting in anthropology class in high school looking at all the transitional forms that they say, that none of them really existed, and listening to the instructor, and he would always, he was like, to pass your test, you have to know that the earth is 5.4 million years old. 5.4 million years old. 5.4 million years old. Well, if that was the case, then it's only 5.4 million and 30 years old then, because it's only about 30 years after, you know what I'm saying? If we figured out how long it was in 87, we should only be a few more years, because they were teaching it to me as what? Fact. It was a fact that it was only that old. But now all of a sudden we've got all these other things that disprove evolution, so if evolution is disproved, the only way to fix the problem is to add time. So if you went from 5.4 million years to 4.5 billion years, can I just tell you, you got a lot of problems with evolution. You got to keep adding that much time. Remember that. It's an important thing to remember. So you got the Scottish geologist Sir Charles Lyell. If you ever look at the Earth layers, he's the one who come up with the column. Okay, here's my problem. You ever look at the earth layers? Can I ask you all, when did it rain dirt? Why is the earth still the same size? If the further we go down, the older it is, then where did all the new stuff come from? Shouldn't the earth be bigger? If we got these layers, that the deeper we go, the older it is? That doesn't make any sense. So remember now, we have to compare gradualism, and I'm going to help you. What we are as creationists is we are catastropheists. The earth changes its face by catastrophes. What does that mean? Quickly, short period of time. All right, so now we look at the word science. It's a noun. Intellectual, practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. So what do we need to do is experiment, right? So now we got to go through the scientific process. Do you want to know which one's true, evolution or creation? We have to do a scientific process. The problem with evolutionists is they forgot what the scientific process was. So I don't care whether they got 6 doctorates, 18 doctorates, they have refused to do real science. And when they do a method of practice, they change things so it comes out the way they want to. Let me help you with this. If you go and get a grant from the United States government for science, you tell them what you're trying to prove. If you don't prove it, you pay the grant back. Who can afford that? So what do? They always make it prove, okay? We're not really looking for the truth. We're looking for what we want the truth to be. Okay, so now that we understand science, look, Revelation 4:11, thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory, honor, and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. Now think about that. Why did God create the earth and the heavens and us? For his pleasure, okay? Not for us to control everything, not for us to decide what goes on. Remember this, you walk and you talk to some people, and a lot of people will sit there and you go, so what are you thinking about? Well, I'm thinking about my purpose here on earth. Okay, your purpose here on earth is to glorify God. If you don't know that's your purpose, you're going to be looking for that purpose the rest of your life. And you're never going to fill that void, because your purpose, God made us to glorify him. We were made to be servants, not to be served. You want to know why you're unhappy? Probably because you're being served and not a servant. You want to be really happy? Be a servant. That's why God made us. Importance of creation. Creation is the primary evidence there is a God. So why do they try to get rid of God? Why do they try to get evolution in and not the creation? Because we get rid of God. What is creation? Look, it's the primary evidence that God exists. Look at Romans chapter 1, verse 20. It says, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. You go, well, what happens if nobody told them about Jesus? Can I tell you, it says that the creation of the world is clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So you say, well, I never heard about Jesus, but you heard about DNA. Where did DNA come from? Well, evolution. It just, happened that way. No, it didn't. There's too much information in DNA. Do you know how your library happened? How did you get a library? It just showed up.
Billions of years.
If you believe that, go to your library, and there will not be anybody bringing books into the library, because they just show up. See, nobody wants to think about it that way. Look, evolution takes way more stupidity. I shouldn't have said that, but it's true.
Amen.
It takes way more stupidity and dumb faith to believe in evolution than it does to believe in a God who created. Why? Because all the evidence points that way. We got DNA. Can I tell you, if you look at that verse right there, what is invisible? Can you see your own DNA? No. Can you see your atoms? No. So the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. They're all made. Who made them? Not some primordial slime that showed up out of nowhere because of some Big Bang. Can I tell you, though, if you don't want to believe in the Big Bang, there was a Big Bang. Because it was quiet until he spoke. And I'm sure his voice was booming. God created how? By word. So Mount St. Helens. We look at Mount St. Helens. This is Mount St. Helens in like 78. This bulge starts forming late 70s. I think it was like 79 it started forming. And by 80, it's like this. Well, that's because the lava was trying to force its way up. So it starts pushing out. Okay? So geologists are watching this. Mount St. Helens, prior to 1980, a bulge forms just prior to the blast. Can I tell you, when it happened, it was gradualism. Y'all get that? We're talking about uniformitarianism. That's it, but prior to 1980, that's it after the blast. Took a long time. Can we not say we're catastropheists? How did the earth change? How did we get the Grand Canyon? In a very short period of time. okay? Now, look at how much earth is gone. That is where the old summit was. If you ever been to Mount St. Helens prior to the explosion, the eruption, you would go out there, that place was full of forest. There were loggers out in that woods all the time, except on Sundays. Okay? There were resorts in that place. It was a beautiful place to go. People climbed to those summits. Not anymore. One day, it's all gone. Okay. The blast was equivalent to 1,600 times the size of the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. Can I tell you that when God decides to show his power and his glory, 16 times the atomic bomb, that's some power. That's not gradual. That's not an accident. The largest landslide in recorded history. Largest landslide in recorded history. Now listen, most of the time when this is interesting about this volcano. Most of the time when a volcano erupts, it blows off the top, and it's usually uniform. It blows straight up. Mount St. Helens blows out the side and runs a landslide down one side instead of out all the sides. There's a reason for it, and I'll show you in a little bit, but watch this. Destroyed 234 square miles of forest. Now, what was the number one industry in that area? Logging. Look at those. Anybody want a toothpick? Those are huge, huge trees that now look like toothpicks, laid over like nothing. It's amazing when you look at it. Creates a mudslide. Now as this goes, just watch this thing. So as this goes, remember this, we're right now doing a scientific observation. How many of you were alive in 1980? How many of you watched some of this on TV? It was around, everybody could see it, okay? So we can call this a scientific observation. This is an experiment. You watch the power of that mudslide. Look, it's changing the face of the earth in minutes. I went to an outhouse with a guy from a church there, and he was a school teacher, and he was, can I just say there's some school teachers that because they're crazy, they're good? You know that? I mean, you're like, man, I want to learn from him because he's just excited. You're kind of like Doc Rock when he starts talking about his bones, you know? I don't know about you guys, but I wish I was there in December when he found the bone because I could see him dancing a jig and acting like a leprechaun, you know? I mean, because they get excited, and that's the kind of people you want to be around. But this guy, he took me out there, and he actually showed me an old outhouse at a forestry campground right outside of there where the mudslide came through, and the only thing you could see of the outhouse is the top. I was standing like 1 foot below the roof. And it had been sitting there. I went there, and that was like 2000, I think 11 or 12, and it was 11 because I have it on the next slide. So in 2011, and this is from 1980, and I'm standing next to this old outhouse, and it's covered in dirt. So how do we get dirt? Look, dirt moves, okay? So how do we get these geological columns? It's because dirt moves. It's not that we get more dirt. It's not because what's on the bottom's older, it's just what's on the bottom was on the bottom. That's it, okay? So now look at these. So sent a mud flow 68 miles to the Columbia River. At that point at the Columbia River, the ocean vessels that were coming in to get to Portland ended up getting stopped because the amount of mud that was in the way in the river, so they couldn't pass because it wasn't deep enough. We're talking those boats, if they went in 5 hours before, would have made it, right? So we're not talking Charles Lyell's uniformitarianism, gradualism. We're talking catastrophism. Look at these. That's where the mud got up to as it passed. I don't know, anybody want to drive that car? Look at the sign. So that sign was a road sign, and he's standing up next to it. Anybody seen a road sign? Anybody know how high they are? We're talking Washington State. You put a sign up high like you do here. Why? So that people can see it. But you also put it up high so the snow doesn't cover it. But the mudslide did. Okay, these are satellite photos from 1974. Right here. This is from 1980 after the explosion. Look at the loss of greenery. But look, 2011, 31 years later. Is it gradualism? If you actually were to go in there and look, there actually is as much, if not more, life of foliage than here. Even though you see some openings and stuff, there's so much more in there. It's a wild jungle. Why? Because at this time they were logging it, and at this time nobody's going in. When loggers go in, people don't understand this. In Montana, when I was a law enforcement officer up there, there was a lawyer from New York City, never left. He doesn't even know what a tree looks like except for when he goes to Central Park. And I think those are plastic because there's enough pollution there to kill everything, okay? But the only real tree he ever gets to see is Central Park. He used to write big lawyer things to shut down logging in Montana. Well, when loggers aren't in there, then you end up having forest fires. Why? Because when a logger goes in and gets the trees out that he's going to take, sometimes they clear cut, sometimes they don't. Number one, you say I'm against clear cutting. Can I tell you that in 20 years, the trees will be fully back the same way they were when they cut them down and that clear cut? So that doesn't make sense. Why? Because see, this is what these idiots don't understand out here. The woods, trees, are a renewable resource, okay? They want to say, oh, we're cutting down the trees, we're going to lose oxygen. No, they're a renewable resource. You don't even have to plant something in place. There's already seeds in the ground for them to start back up, okay? So clear cutting's not necessarily bad, but when they started fighting clear cutting, the loggers ended up selectively cutting. So they go in selectively cut. Well, what happens when they go in selectively cut? They drive through there, they drag them out. You know, all that underbrush that grows up in there, it gets dragged out. Then you don't have all those dead fuels, okay? So it's good for it. Look, if you don't cultivate your garden, you're going to get a whole bunch of weeds, and it's going to kill all the stuff that shouldn't get killed, right? What is our job? What did God say to us? He turned to Adam and he said, you have dominion over this world. So what is Adam's job? Is to take care of the world. So why do we log? Hey, you know what? Because we're killing two birds with one stone. I'm getting newer, stronger trees because newer trees are growing up, but I'm also aerating the ground by dragging trees through there, which is making it for stronger root systems. You start looking at all that stuff, there's a whole bunch of positive stuff to it. So should we be doing things? Absolutely. We don't let it lie. Why are there big major, if you ever look back in the 1800s, there were major wildfires. Because if man doesn't cultivate the earth, God will. If you're not going to cut your grass, God will cut it for you by burning it. It's the truth. Animal population larger than before eruption. Now listen, this is why. Everybody goes, well, how did that happen? Ronald Reagan, when that thing exploded, he said, and I can't remember if it's like a 250-mile radius or something. Anyway, he drew 2 circles around there. He said, this circle, nobody can go in to do anything, and if a scientist goes in, he can't take anything out. He can only go in to observe. And then the next ring, he said, hey, there's some things that can be done in that, but you can't do everything you could do before. So they kind of took out the logging and everything. What is he planning? He's planning that we can observe what happens. Okay? So, 4 months after the eruption, the vegetation starts to reclaim the area. 4 months. Well, after the flood, what about Noah? As the waters recede, what happens? All the seeds that are in the ground, they start growing. Look, God created it with his voice. He can recreate it any way he wants. It's not a slow process. Look, we're talking about total destruction with a fire so hot that you would say there couldn't be anything growing, yet in 4 months, things start growing. What's funny is they found out that the first plants that started growing there aren't there anymore. They started growing up, and the animals would come in and eat them, and they'd poop, and then all of a sudden a different plant would grow up until finally they got the plants they got now. Why? Because it's the process God believes that he needs to do to take care of it. Can I tell you, if God believes it, then I believe it, and it's got to be the best way to do it. Right? So we're talking, if we go back to that other picture, in 31 years, we have the same amount or more vegetation in that area. That's astonishing. Does that meet with Charles Lyell's uniformitarianism? No. You know, the Bible talks about prophets. If he's truly a prophet of God, everything he says comes true. If he's not a prophet of God, then what he says doesn't come true. Can I tell you why we want to listen to Charles Lyell? This proves that he's wrong. Here's the other thing. If you ever study the columns, if you go to the Grand Canyon, you look at the geological column, it is not the same as Charles Lyell's. If you go to Australia, it's not going to be in the same order as Charles Lyell's. They're going to be in different orders. Why? Because different dirt was laid down at different times, having different minerals. And honestly, if you look, anybody ever go to Arizona and see the painted mountains? If you go there and you start seeing the painted mountains, why is it that some of them, there's lines of green? Copper. Why is there red? Iron. Do you know if you go to the Grand Canyon, there's a layer that looks like it's full of iron, but it's not. It's the layer above it because the water's running it down, and as soon as you just wipe your hand across that rock, it's white. So you go, well, what's in those columns? Why are the dinosaurs where they're at? Why are there fish where they're at? Why is this and that? Can I just tell you that there's seashells and fish and everything like that in every layer? Why were they the first ones on the bottom? Because they're not so big. Do you know a lot of times when we look at the dinosaurs, we'll find a dinosaur and we'll find all his bones, and we'll go down another couple layers and we'll find his footprints. If you have to go down further, can I just tell you he was running a little bit faster. It's the truth. Those columns don't work. Lyell's, nothing of Lyell's makes any sense when you really get down to it and start looking at it. But yet, we still teach about him, and we still teach that column in history and geology and all that, and science in our schools today. So 4 months after the eruption, vegetation starts to reclaim the area. Look, it sprinkled ash across the world, 16,000 times the nuclear explosion of Hiroshima. Ash spread across the world. If you ever go to Washington, they like to tell people that if you haven't come and visited Washington, Washington already visited you. I remember in 1980, I was in Germany. Do you know the ash fell where I was at? From Mount St. Helens. The ash fell all the way across the world. This is not a small thing. All right? Hundreds of layers in 3 hours. Now look, can I say that in 1980 we observed this, okay? There's actually 3 different eruptions that occur, but we watch this over a period of 2 years, that we watch these layers occurring. Yet, if you were to go and talk to a modern evolutionary geologist who believes in Laos, he would sit there and tell you each one of those little lines is 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years. I mean, they got, and they'll come up with whatever they want to make those years, because every line is not the same amount of years. I don't know how they figured that out. I guess it's whenever you ask them is whatever you get, because it's never true anyway, right? But here we got layers in 3 hours, okay? Look at this right here. Doesn't that look like the Grand Canyon? That's Mount St. Helens. 3 deposits and 3 events. You look at that. The first one at the bottom where the lady's standing is airfall, so ash falling straight down, May 18th, 1980. The second time that it erupts is June 12th, 1980, and it's the protoplastic flow. So because it's a flow, we've got water flowing, we lay down layers in lines. You ever go to a place that had a tsunami and go on the beach and you cut a section out of that beach, you'll find layers. You'll find layers. If there was water movement and dirt, that mud flow type, you're going to see layers. Now you look at the last one at mud flow deposit, March 19th, 1982. Here's what's interesting. There's a river system there now that was created in a day. When did that happen? That happened in 1982 on the third one. Why? Because 2 winters went by. Up in that bowl, snow and ice got in there. It sat in there. Okay, so you had 2 eruptions. The first one creates the bowl. The second eruption, you see where it throws those layers down. The third eruption in 1982, you've had this buildup of 2 years of ice and snow inside the bowl. All of a sudden it erupts. What happens when you put heat to ice? You get water. So all of a sudden that water comes down and it creates this. It creates a canyon 100 feet deep. When you go out there, some people call it the small Grand Canyon. So how do you think the Grand Canyon was formed? A whole bunch of water breaking a dam and running through and cutting rock. June 12, 1980. Throughout the day, the plume rose 1,000 to 5,000 feet above the rim. About 9:05 p.m., the eruption became very violent and the plume shot up 45,000 feet. Closed Portland Airport 7 hours. About 12:15 a.m., violent phase wound down, deposits over 200 layers on the valley floor. Better than a layer of Notice what it says. The professional geologists were astonished. Why? Because there wasn't 1,000 years between each line. It doesn't fit their lie. So what do they do? Look, if it doesn't fit the lie, we got to add on time. Why don't modern day scientists, why don't we teach Mount St. Helens in schools? It doesn't fit what they want you to know. What's up, Melody? You got something? Or you just itching your underarm? All right, baby. Okay, so why is that? Look, it doesn't fit, so we're not going to talk about it. Message from God. God ordered the formations. God chose the time, and God chose the direction. Remember I told you Mount St. Helens didn't blow straight up. Think about this. 1,600 times the force and power of the atomic bomb at Hiroshima. If that atomic bomb only took out the majority of Hiroshima, if you ever go, the outskirts were still there. Then how much 1,600 times should it take out? It should have taken out that whole western seaboard of Washington. But it didn't. So you start looking at it. The side of the mountain that blew in a direction that there was no major towns. There was actually no minor towns. It was all forest. It blew in a direction on purpose. Why? Because nobody got hurt. What was the day? The day was Sunday. What do we know in 1980? 90% of the Americans in the United States went to church. Did people work on Sunday? No. So where were they? Not in the woods. Here's another kicker. If you ever been to that area, he ordered the formations, he chose the time, he chose the direction. Notice these guys are out there with their cameras and they can see it. Ever go to Washington? This is Mount St. Helens on a normal day. I spent an entire week there with a creationist who ran a creation museum called the Seven Wonders Creation Museum. You go to his creation museum, and Lloyd Anderson was a great guy. Some of these slides are his. He told me to take it, make it so that I could give it and go out there and give it, because he was in 2011, he was 85 or something. I mean, he was hard of hearing, and he was slowing down, and he knew it, and he wanted it to keep going. He actually asked me to take the museum, and I said no, because I believe God would have me to do something else, but I love creation. So he said, hey, why don't you take a lot of my slides and then build your own and teach it? And so I actually listened to, he said, hey, I got a 30-minute one, I got a 45-minute one, and I got an hour and a half one. Which one do you want? I said, well, let's start with the hour and a half, and then we'll work our way back. My family sat in his little museum and watched every one of them. And he gave his presentations. And every day, he had me park in the bus parking of the museum, plug into his sign outlet so we had electricity in the RV, and had me stay there. And every morning at 7 o'clock, he'd give me a briefing like I was in the military again, and then he'd send me with a map where to go see it, because he had to stay at the museum in case somebody came by. And we did that for a week. Well, in that week, only one day for 20 minutes did I see the mountain. And that was being up close to the mountain at the observatory, that the mountain is just across the valley from you. And so this is Mount St. Helens normally during that time. If you ever go up to Seattle, look, Seattle sunshine is a drizzle. And to drizzle, you have to have clouds. So you go, I like Seattle. Well, you don't like the sun because you don't get to see it. I'm just being honest. You go up in that area, Washington, you're not going to see that sun often. Why was it on that particular Sunday? It was a full sunny day. They could see the mountain from Portland. Why? Because God wanted everybody to see. Look, in 1980, God was fed up with everybody talking about evolution and saying, hey, this is how it goes. You go, well, why did Ronald Reagan block all that off to make it a scientific observation? Well, in 1983, Ronald Reagan said that the reason this nation is a strong nation, it's the greatest nation on earth, is because of the Bible. So then he made, by public law, the Bible is the only recognized word of God in the United States. Even though right now we got the Quran being quoted in our Congress, but technically that's against the law. So Ronald Reagan knew, and he wanted to make sure that some of these lies would be taken out. Well, this scientific observation is the lie that's going to be taken out. So you look at this and it says, the face of the earth changed in minutes. many layers deposited in hours, and a river system formed in a day. Can I tell you, with that observation alone, where are we at? Uniformitarianism and gradualism's out the door. How do we get all these layers in our geologic column today? Is because there was a lot of water, there's a lot of dirt, and it's laid down in a short period of time. We don't have this long period of time going on. Why is it that in a geologic column, maybe we'll see it tomorrow, I don't know, I'm probably going to do a presentation for Sunday service since we're already set up. But if you look, there's places you can go and you can find a petrified tree standing straight up through many layers of that column. Well, I don't know about you, but if it was raining dirt over years and every 1,000 years I got a little bit more dirt, I can't keep a stick from rotting. And in 1,000 years, there's no way that stick is still there. So it had to be laid down in a very short period of time. And so when you start looking at that, you go, oh, well, you get these modern scientists. Well, how do you prove that? Well, just look at Mount St. Helens. Because here's the funny thing, most of us were witnesses. And we can still get the videos for the witness. If you weren't here then, you can go get the videos. Creation greatest defense, here's the thing, God's greatest defense is creation. Creation's greatest defense is Mount St. Helens because it is a true scientific experiment. You go in that first circle around Mount St. Helens and look, to get in that area, you got to have so many permits, it's unbelievable. If you ever met Steve Austin, and not the wrestler, but Dr. Steve Austin, he goes in there all the time. He goes in there so much that he went into the lakes and everything, and he watched the trees that were floating drop down to the bottom. He watched the peat start getting into its layers. You want to know where you get your oil from? It's layers of wood that were floating in the ocean that got covered by dirt that ended up sitting underneath. And they sit underneath and they start decaying and they start turning into oils. And in the coal fields. You ever look at a coal mine and you go in and when you start scraping coal out, there's actually a flat top. Why? Because it's crushed organics. How does that happen? Not over millions and billions of years, it's just a flood. It's one flood. How do we know that all that happened that way? Because we look at a small experiment to see the world's greatest catastrophe, Noah's flood. So what are we? Catastropheists. We believe in that God has catastrophes that changes the face of the earth. Mount St. Helens. When your mind is on God, you're in the right mind. When your mind is on the world, well, you're not here because you're playing a video game or you're at a football game or you're just watching TV. Because the world will steal you away from God. Where are you going to be tomorrow? Here's the question. Where should you be tomorrow? All right. 10 minutes, and then Doc's going to start. So take a pee break, and we'll get you all back. I should say any questions. If you guys got questions, just say. I can't answer them. No. Which one are we going to, Doc? Ice Age, NT?
The Great Ice Age, life in the Great Ice Age. While we're just kind of sitting here, I might add a few little comments. I didn't have my paper, so I wrote it as best I could on plastic bag. All I had in my pocket. Talking about You see, work the coal.
Coal.
Wyoming, taking two big trips and making one big creation trip with families to see that from the museum and all. And, I get outfitted here. And Wyoming is an absolute paradise for catastrophe.